Welcome to the first edition of Brands Banter, where we interview cool people from cool brands, we trade insights, stories, and we share perspectives. And this week, we're going to be talking to Dan Sokolik, head of marketing at Lee's Famous Recipe Chicken. Now, I could go on and on about this guy's career, considering the fact that he's helped build up Domino's, Subway, and now most recently Lee's Famous Recipe Chicken. But he's also got a history on the agency side, so he knows both worlds, whether it's the brand and creative, or whether it's the practical, going ahead and helping build a business up. So this guy really can do it all from a marketing standpoint. We're gonna try and decode some of his stories along the way and see how he got to where he got and how the brands that he's been a part of have evolved. And on top of that too, he is one avid music lover. If you're a Van Halen fan, then you might have something in common with him. But let me tell you, he doesn't love it as much as he loves his Missouri Tigers. So again, stay tuned for this episode. We're super excited to have Dan Sokolik on, and it's gonna be a good one. All right, we got our first guest here. We're super excited to have Dan Sokolik joining us. Listen, a good friend of mine, somebody who's extremely versed in the world of brand building, QSR, you name it, he's been there, he's done it. So, listen, before I start going through all the things that I want to kind of talk to you about, man, first thing I want to do is you and I, we have a similarity. We're both in marketing. When somebody asks you what you do for a living, how do you communicate that? What do you tell them when they say, what's your job? What do you do?
Well, for me, it's really easy. I sell fried chicken. That's what I do. That's what I do. When people ask me what I do, I tell them I sell fried chicken.
You can't hate on that. I think that that's clever, nice, short, and succinct. I always have a hard time telling people what I do. I'm like, where do I start? But listen.
Well, it's easy when you've got a singular focused brand or product to get behind. And I just tell people that's what I do. I mean, at the end of the day, responsible for driving sales of our, main product, which in the case of my current role is fried chicken. I've said the same thing with sub sandwiches and pizzas and burgers before too.
Well, yeah, we're going to get into that a little bit later, but I think, one of the things that I would love for you to share is working in marketing in such a crazy world. How did you even find your way into marketing? Before you went into food and QSR, or maybe it all happened at the same time, how did you get there?
Yeah, so I went into college wanting to be a sports writer, and realized pretty early on, like my freshman year, as I was covering the women's basketball team for the school paper, that, man, I don't think I want to do this for the rest of my life. Like, how many different ways can I write about the same basketball game I just watched? I took an intro to advertising class, and that was the spark for me. Got me excited about telling brand stories and changing consumer behaviors.
That's such a funny overlap. I had the same exact thing. I started out at Ohio State as a journalist, writing for The Lantern, if you have ever heard of that. And I realized, I was like, this is fun, but I don't know if I could cut my teeth doing this. It's super difficult. So then from there, you kind of zero in on marketing, advertising. How did you kind of find your way into food and QSR first, initially?
Yeah, so one of my early jobs out of college, I was working for a casino. And part of my responsibilities there was marketing our food and beverage outlets within the complex. So just kind of piqued my interest, and when that job ran its course, I kind of stumbled into the path that's taken me where I am now with focus in quick service restaurants. Had an opportunity to work for an individual that owned and operated Domino's pizza locations, and that was a big eye opener for me. Being able to build a career path in this space.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is always interesting is when you're coming up on getting your first professional gig, whether that's getting out of school or what have you. It's such a difficult kind of growing pain type of time. I mean, listen, you've got one that's coming up on that in about, I believe, 4 years, 5 years. They're going to be in that situation. Let me ask you a little bit, like, take yourself back to when you were graduating college and you were first going to land a professional gig. What did that kind of look like? Did you feel like, even though you had zeroed in on the marketing realm, that that's exactly where you wanted to go down, or were you just trying to get as many different, you know, toes in the sand as possible? What was that like when you were first going after the big professional gig at a young age?
Yeah, well, the very first job I had out of college was with an advertising agency, and that's where I thought I wanted my career to go. Having a degree in advertising, had interned at some agencies prior, and I'm like, well, that's just it. I want to build a whole career on the agency side, and it was a good first experience. Kind of like my time writing for the school paper early on. I figured out that it's not the end all be all. It's not just because I thought that was what I wanted to do doesn't mean that's where I need to be. And early career path, I tried a couple of different things before, before it led me into this crazy fast food world that I've been in now for a while.
I love that you brought the agency thing up, because you are a very rare breed that has lived on the brand and the agency side. And not many people can kind of share that perspective. Can you talk a little bit about how that has changed your look on business and marketing in general, being able to have worn both of those hats in your professional life?
Well, I always I take it a step further with my quick service restaurant background, because I got my start working for a franchisee. So when you think about the seats at the table, there's the brand or corporate side, there's the agency or consultant or partner side, and then there's the operators themselves. And I didn't own the stores myself, but I represented them, and so yeah, it's really, I always tell the story that it allows you to see things from everyone's perspective, because everyone's got different key priorities when you're even within the same conversation amongst those kind of three-legged stool partnerships there. Agencies, and rightfully so, just come at problems and challenges from a different perspective than the brand folks. And franchisees are a whole different beast. We can talk more about that, but yeah, when you're worried or focused in on the performance of individual units versus the building a brand versus delivering campaigns, etc. It's just different ways of everyone's working towards the same goals, but they're looking at it all completely differently.
So then I think what I would love to follow up that with is there anything that you love, hate, or miss from being at an agency?
Yeah, timesheets. I hated the timesheets. I'm glad to never, hopefully, ever have to do that again.
Yeah, I can't say that I blame you. That's it's hard to keep track of everything you're doing throughout the week already. So once you start going back through the calendar and you're like, okay, 3 hours on this, 6 hours on this, I get it, man. I totally get it. So, you know, in retrospect, as we're kind of talking about the beginnings of your professional career, I want to take a look at, maybe, were there any turning points through your career that taught you a valuable lesson? Maybe it was some sort of failure or mishap that ended up being a lesson or a blessing, or maybe losing a job along the way. Like, kind of talk a little bit about that. Was there a specific turning point in your career that taught you something really critical?
I think it was just that exposure coming in when I was working for this individual that owned a bunch of Domino's pizzas, with how many different types of opportunities there can be to still say, hey, I'm doing marketing in the fast food space, but like so many different ways to do it. Like early on in my career, I guess I just hadn't given it that much thought, but the notion of, hey, you can go work, for providers, suppliers, agencies, etc., or you can work on the company side, or you can work, grassroots, boots on the ground, driving individual store metrics. So I think it was just that, seeing that broad view once I got kind of into the industry was a big eye opener, and it helped me chart my path. I knew that in order to land the kind of corporate brand building job that I wanted, I needed to get that agency experience, relevant agency experience in the category, because that would help steps on the ladder to get where I wanted to go.
So, do you think that there was a lot of trial and error early on in your career, just trying something to see if it works and if it sticks, that kind of ultimately led you a little bit further along the way to be like, all right, this is my path. I know where I'm going.
Well, I mean, that's marketing in a nutshell right there, trying things and seeing what works, right? So, yes. Did it... I don't know that changed my career path necessarily, but just like the things you do along the way, it's all about that.
Yeah, and I'm glad to hear you say that, because I couldn't agree more. I had a conversation with someone who was coming up on graduating college, and they asked me, hey, when I'm thinking about my professional career, what should I do? And I basically said, what you need to do is narrow down what you don't like to do or what you can't do, because then you're going to figure out really quickly what you love to do and what you're good at and what you feel like your calling is. I took that same approach like you. Started out in journalism, wasn't very good at it. Then I switched to sales, wasn't as good at it. Found my way to marketing, and I think it was kind of a partnership for me that was meant to be. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. You got to try these things just to see if you even like it. Because if you like it, then you're going to be much more inclined to do a better job. So, well, it seemed like you were going to say something there. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, the other thing too is, and I know, I know because we've talked so much in the past, you can relate to this. It's like finding that excitement in what you do. My first job that I mentioned was with an ad agency, but I was working on an agricultural pharmaceutical account, and I mean it would put me to sleep. Right? It was boring stuff. Parlayed that into that opportunity working for a casino where I was selling fun. I mean, that's talk about selling fried chicken or selling other pieces of food. I was selling fun when you market a casino, and it's a hard thing to come down from when you leave that. Like, how do you replace that? Sure as heck didn't want to get back into agricultural pharmaceutical stuff, right? And that's where the fast food industry really kind of scratches that itch for me a little bit too, because it's fun. I mean, yes, we're selling food, but we're selling the experience, and you need to make it fun to stand out. So it's the closest thing I think I could have found to staying in that casino business.
Did the casino ever give you a chance to bet with house money?
No, didn't work that way.
Oh man,
Didn't work that way.
because that would have been real fun right there. Well, listen, I think you kind of said it best already, but thinking about what motivates you is because that was going to be my follow-up question, is kind of what motivates you, and it seems like you kind of really nailed it right on the head. You got to be passionate about the subject matter and what it is that either you're selling or the story that you're telling. I think you and I can agree. I think the story is always more important than the sale, because the story is something that's going to, one, it's got longevity to it. It's going to stick. People are going to remember it. But it's also that connection, that kind of emotional connective tissue that holds it all together. So, all right, man, listen, let's talk about some QSR stuff here, because there's a lot of stuff going on in QSR. And obviously, you being in the industry, I would love to hear some of your takes on the things. I want to hear, are there any trends that you're seeing in QSR that are top of mind for you right now that are kind of differentiating in the market? Maybe a product, a technology, or a service offering?
Well, luckily, it's chicken. 'Cause chicken is booming, and I'm fortunate to be in a place where I'm selling chicken. But if you look at the performance of chains that sell some form of chicken, right, and there's lots of different ways you can sell chicken, but look at that relative to, say hamburgers or other of your more traditional QSRs, the chicken guys are killing it. And so, I mean, that first and foremost is when you look at the state of QSR, it's all about chicken these days.
Taking a look at restaurant marketing over the years, how have you kind of seen it change and adapt from when you first got into the industry to now?
I'm going to show my age now because I was working in the pizza business before online ordering was even a thing, right? So talk about a game changer there. I remember, and this is the most wrong I've ever been in my life. I remember when we first started kind of dabbling in online ordering, thinking that, hey, consumers aren't going to want to, they're not going to trust us to deliver their order without actually picking up the phone and speaking to somebody. And I couldn't have been more wrong about that, because clearly it's been a huge game changer for pizza, especially, but across the whole industry. So yeah, I mean, that's, talk about evolution. But also the way, the tactical thing, again, pizza is just a great example of that, because we were hopelessly addicted to direct mail in the pizza game back then. I mean, we, not just Domino's, but every brand was like on a weekly basis trying to get into people's mailboxes, because that was the best way to market and get that sale. And that's changed significantly. I still believe in direct mail in a limited fashion, certainly not to the excess that the pizza guys did back then, but pizza's got the unique advantage of knowing who their customers are, because if you want me to bring a pizza to your house, you have to tell me who you are and where you live. We don't get that luxury in the rest of QSR, so the pizza guys can market in a whole different way now, digitally, and that the rest of us try to catch up with, and that's the other piece, is it's just that importance of the customer data. Didn't used to be a thing. We didn't used to know who our customers are. Now there's so many ways to find out who our customers are, whether it's loyalty programs, whether it's credit card data. There's just so many different ways now to get to know who your customers are better.
Dude, data is everything. It really does lead to more informed decisions when it comes to what maybe a marketing strategy is, what maybe a design tactic could be. Having the data is something that it's irrefutable when it's there, so then you got to try and make your inferences from there. I kind of want to talk a little bit about Subway, because Subway has a very unique model. That kind of walk in, slide through the line, really they were major differentiators with that. When you look at fast casual QSR kind of get in the line, walk through, is there anything that you have seen radically change in that type of experience and offering from your time at Subway to how it's gotten to now?
Yeah, I think maybe the shift away a little bit from the make it your own way. I mean, Subway has certainly shifted towards a more curated menu versus just going down the line and pointing and picking and choosing. Now you can still do that, but they're trying to get away from that. I think from a desire to, one, make ordering easier, and two, improve throughput for the really busy locations. And I think you start to see that even in some of the other concepts that mimic the Subway approach. Whether it's Mediterranean bowls or burritos, Mexican, etc. I'm starting to see a little bit more of like a curated menu versus just pick one, two, or three things.
Let me ask you, do you think it's easier for the associates to work through a curated menu? Maybe it's better for the portions and how they're scaling things out. Like, why do you think that they're switching to curated options?
I think it's easier for customers to order digitally, first of all,
Good point.
and that's where such a focal shift is. With any of those places, they can set up multiple lines. You see it at Chipotle. They'll have the main line, but then they'll have a side line for the online orders, and there are some Subways they'll do that. They'll have a prep station in the back, etc. So the more they can shift digital to digital orders versus having bottlenecks at that point of order, and so I think those types of curated menus are easier for customers to order and easier for the crews to remember how to make.
So I think what I'll do is I'll transition away from the new conversation then, and I will ask you about in your entire life working in QSR, of course, over the years and the brands you've been a part of. Is there anything that's timeless that will never go out of style that you've seen always be a focal and important? Because I think I have a guess on what your answer might be, but I just want to hear from you if you have another
Well,
one.
yeah, I mean, when people ask what moves the needle, I mean, there's really, in the QSR space, there's really two things. There's price points and there's new products. And you could start to layer in customer experience. And there's some of these newer brands, some of the newer chicken brands that we compete against certainly have upped the game from an experience standpoint. But even still, there's brands out there that used to lean solely on the experience that are now doing limited time offers that said they were never going to do them before, and they're doing them. Jimmy John's, I'm looking at you. You know that menu didn't change for years, and now all of a sudden they got new LTOs rolling out all the time, right? So it to me it always comes back to what can you market at a price point, or what's the new product that's going to get people in the door. That's how you move the needle.
That's such an insightful comment, because what I thought you were going to refer to maybe would be something a little bit more elementary of food and service, right? If it's got to be good food and the service has got to be great, but hearing you talking about pushing the needle with new product and then of course it being a good price, that wasn't even something that necessarily was at the top of my mind. Of course it's important, but I figured you would even go to a step earlier in the process, but that totally makes sense. And I love the way that you put that, because I'm always looking for an LTO from my favorite brands that I go to, and it makes such a huge difference. All right. So listen, I think I kind of want to talk a little bit about the emotion of working in restaurant. I feel like restaurants and that whole dining experience in general is really emotional. What is it about dining? What is it about QSR and the brands that we have kind of associated and attached to them that makes them really emotional? Is there something that comes to mind for you there?
I mean, I think it's because people, uh, your memories revolve around events that usually involve food, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's hanging out with your friends or going out to dinner at a particular place with your family. I mean, it's the memories and when you can tie those memories to a flavor, to a product, to a taste of something. I mean, that's what we're all striving for in this QSR space, is to be there, to be in people's memories so that they'll remember you to come back again.
I was thinking about that question before I asked it, and I kind of had the same response. I think about the trust that you build with brands when you spend time with family and friends there over the years, because you can look back and be like, like so many of my friends and I would go to this place, or my dad would take me here, or whatever that thing might be for you that connects you to the deeper kind of story and history. Because even though brands of course have histories, we have histories with the brands. And I think that oftentimes that's something that isn't talked about enough too, is that history that we have with them and the role that they kind of play in our lives. I want to ask you if you have any sage advice for folks that are young marketers that are kind of entering the restaurant space or the franchisee world. What kind of 2 cents would you offer to a young marketer that's getting into this world?
That's a tough question. Just listen. I think more than anything, you can count on maybe two hands the number of major game-changing ideas that have happened in the QSR space, right? I mean, you can point to things like McDonald's introducing breakfast, Domino's 30-minute guarantee, Subway's $5 foot long, things like that. There's not many of them that have been game changers. So, a lot of what happens in the QSR space is recycled ideas, because they're recycled because they work, right? So, the advice for somebody coming in is you always want to everyone's dream is to hit that home run and find that next big one, because it'll happen. There'll be some out there, but don't discount all the tried and true approaches along the way, right? So learn from the folks that have been there. Keep your eyes wide open and just listen.
Well said. All right, man, let's transition. Let's talk a little bit about Lee's. So obviously you're in a really cool role at Lee's, and that's how I've had the esteemed pleasure of getting to know you. So how did you find your way to your current role at Lee's?
So I started working for Lee's ad agency, actually. They brought me on to manage the account, and after a short time doing that, was asked to kind of switch sides of the table and lead efforts over here on the brand side.
So they poached you.
Yeah, yeah. Which was fine because I didn't like filling out that timesheet at the agency anyhow.
Hey, listen. Now you got one sheet to fill out. Well, I mean, I think what's really fascinating about that is when talent speaks for itself, people are going to go after it, and that seems to be a little bit of your story. So, speaking of seeing your talent on display, I want to talk about the rebrand. You've helped oversee a major legacy rebrand for Lee's, and I really want to talk a little bit. First off, what have you learned in the process of overseeing this rebrand?
Don't do too much. Our brand has been around for as long as it has for a reason, and so we were very careful to make the right changes, and not too many changes, not too big of a change, but just find that right balance. And with your team's help, we did. I had to rein it back in a little bit.
Well, you know how creatives are. They like to think about all the possibilities, and sometimes you got to say, "Hey, well, that's an impossibility. We can't do that."
That's right. But it was tempting to be enamored by like the big change that your team put forth, and we did have to kind of rein it back in a little bit because I think it would have been a mistake to change too much.
And I think honestly, the way that it worked out was it couldn't have gone better with the actual output of what ended up coming from that. I want to ask, was there a favorite moment that you had during that process?
That's a tough question. The icon that you see right here that your team put forth, I was not in love with it at first. I was in love with what we call our word mark, the typography that we used for the actual logo itself, not the icon, but the word mark logo. I fell in love with that the minute I saw it. This one had to grow on me, so I guess that first time seeing the word mark, finally after all those iterations, when that was slid in front of me, that was probably the most memorable piece of all the work we did.
Well, look how good Helen looks now. Helen looks
Yeah,
good on packaging and on merch and everything.
She has grown on me. The name is not. But yeah, the icon itself and the need for an icon, that was something big that your team brought to the table. Like our logo before had always just been our brand name, and your team reworked that and put it into different formats and sizes and shapes and colors, and that was awesome. We needed that, but the addition of the icon along with just the word mark from a branding standpoint was something that didn't come into the process necessarily looking for, and like I said, wasn't even necessarily in love with it at first sight, but over time, and as we were starting to use it and get more comfortable with it, because it's been 2 years now since we rolled out the visual identity change. It's a vital part. Now I tell the story. I'll show our franchisees some of the most memorable icons out there. Like the Nike icon or Apple or whatever, and I'll slap this up there and next to it and say, we're not there yet, but that's why we're doing this, is so that people will remember us without having to read words or at a quick glance know who we are. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the icon now.
So let me ask you this. You kind of alluded to it a little bit already with, trying not to do too much, but what's been the biggest challenge in keeping the heritage of Lee's, but also modernizing to kind of get today's customer involved and excited about the brand?
You can't tell the story of our brand without talking about the history and the heritage and the legacy, and I'm sure you're going to ask me to go into that here in a little bit. and that's what makes us unique and different. We're not just some other brand. We've got a real story behind us, and so it would have been foolish not to keep that a part of our kind of identity.
Well, thanks for teeing up my next question. Why don't you allude a little bit to some of the Lee's brand history and kind of talk about some of the really cool stories that have been built up with the brand along the way?
Yeah. So everybody always asks me who the heck is Lee? What was Lee's story? And it's funny because I can't tell Lee's story without talking about our primary competitor at the same time. But so that's the real challenge from a marketing and advertising standpoint. From a conversation standpoint, we can get into it. Lee Cummings, who founded our brand in 1966, was the nephew of Colonel Sanders. And everybody knows who Colonel Sanders is. I don't have to talk about what brand he, along with his nephew, helped build. And that was Lee's story. Lee helped the Colonel build that brand. Worked with him for many, many years. I think he reached a title of president of that brand before their family sold it. And Lee was a lot younger than his uncle, and was not done making fried chicken yet. So went out and started his own brand after that transaction happened.
Always such a fascinating thing to kind of, talk about and hear. Just the kind of connecting threads between the best of the best. And I want to thank Lee for the damn good chicken tenders that I've had over the years as well. You know what I mean? So
There was a lot of greatness that came out of that, because I don't know if I ever told you this, but another key executive at the time with the Colonel's brand, who went off to start his own brand, was Dave Thomas, who started Wendy's. So he and Lee and the Colonel kind of built that brand up, and so yeah, a lot of good things came from that organization.
so fascinating, and it's so cool to hear it from you, because I feel like so many people have never really been able to connect the dots, or are just completely unfamiliar with how it all came together and how many of those threads are connected between those brands and the stories there. I kind of want to talk to you a little bit more about marketing and talking about marketing for 2026. Is there a focus for 2026 from the Lee's brand that you can share with me that you're kind of trying to target and go after next year?
Well, we were founded in 1966, so it's our 60th anniversary, and we're gonna lean pretty heavily into that. Again, with the ability to tell that story of the legacy, but also, have a key moment to celebrate there. So that's going to be a big thing for us next year.
Yeah, a lot of history. Very fascinating. I kind of want to ask you about looking at 2025 as we're coming up towards the end of this year. Were there any highlights or slam dunks from a marketing standpoint this year that you and the team are proud of, that you look back on and you say, man, that was fantastic?
Believe it or not, Mother's Day is our busiest day of the year. And this year we leaned into that a little bit and had like a social media activation, a little stunt that we did around Mother's Day that went really, really well. I thought we had our best Mother's Day ever, and we created what we call it the Mother's Day hotline, and that had a recorded message and then also a website that gave people tips on how to make sure their mom had the best Mother's Day ever. And of course those tips involved coming to get some fried chicken from us so she didn't have to cook, but just kind of leaning into that what people wouldn't necessarily think of as a focal holiday, or most people, if I ask them what they think our biggest days of the year are, they'll say Super Bowl or Halloween, something like that. Mother's Day didn't register in their mind, but it makes a ton of sense because, again, with fried chicken relative to other, and again we're old school legacy kind of bone-in fried chicken, family meal replacement. Different occasions versus other QSR, and so I was pretty proud of what we did there around Mother's Day.
That's really fascinating. You know, I really never hear of folks targeting a day like that for a major campaign and then an activation there. And hearing you talk about it, you know, it almost makes me want to switch from getting flowers for my mom to maybe saying, "Let's go get some fried chicken." You know, she loves fried chicken, so I might have to run that by her next year and see and see her thoughts there. That could be a really fun experience. So I appreciate you sharing that. I think you know you're kind of an expert now on working with QSR brands that have a legacy. You know, you have been at three that are really ingrained in history. And I kind of want to ask you, what piece of advice do you offer other brands that maybe are legacy brands in the restaurant world that are considering a rebrand, that are going to do their own kind of reimagining of themselves?
Don't stray too far from what the core of your brand already is. You know that uh, for us, as we looked to modernize a brand that had not been updated in a long time from a visual identity standpoint. You know, the 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 temptation was there to get really crazy with it. Um, and you know, you can look at all the Cracker Barrel stuff. I mean, that's just don't be Cracker Barrel. That's basically what I would tell people. Don't do that. Um,
You know, the thing about Cracker Barrel too, I'm kind of glad you brought that up. I felt like it looked so good on the packaging. The packaging looked really good, and I thought they were really close, man. They could have made a couple tweaks and you know, like some simplistic pieces. As a matter of fact, I think there was a LinkedIn post that somebody had shared and you commented on and I commented. You and I kind of had the same thing in our head for how close it really was, but they just went that 20% too far. And I
Well,
think,
and they left themselves so incredibly vulnerable to the attacks that they got.
yeah.
That was my thing. I didn't think it was all that horrible, and some of their justification for doing it made a lot of sense. You know, and in today's digital environment, you can't have nearly as complex a logo as they had. You need simple lines, right? That was what they were trying to get. They left themselves too vulnerable. You know, and they probably didn't tell their own story enough of what they were trying to do there. So if you're going to make some changes, make sure people understand why you're making the changes.
It's a really good point. I think I kind of want to ask you this too. Do you think it's justified from the consumer reactions and how wild those got? Or do you kind of feel for the brand in a situation like that?
Yeah, I feel for them a little bit. Remember, I mean, it was a combination of true, authentic, organic kind of feedback and groundswell, but it was also stoked by, um, you know, the guerrilla PR warfare going on too. So it wasn't that just amplified it and blew it up and turned it viral. And so that's what I mean by like protect yourself. Don't leave yourself that vulnerable to that. You gotta remember, I worked for Subway for almost 10 years. We we had lots of instances of that. You know, if you remember the 11-inch foot long debacle.
Yes.
But that picture was a year old before it ever even showed up in the United States. It came from Australia or somewhere else. You know, that didn't happen by accident. It happened. It was corporate PR warfare. That stuff happens out there. So you got to protect yourself from that.
That's such an insightful piece. You know, I remember being younger and some goofballs would go to a Subway and they would measure out their sandwich. They would bring a rule. I'm sure you saw tons of that after that moment happened, but that was really a kind of earth-shattering moment because the $5 foot long, and I think at that time, if I'm not mistaken, it had transitioned from being $5 to maybe like $6 or maybe a little bit more than $5, and everybody started getting up in arms about that. So that was, yeah, I totally forgot about that, but that's such a
Oh, and
fascinating.
there's others. There's no tuna in the tuna. Um,
Oh yeah.
you know that these stories don't just as much as you'd like to people think they're organic and viral and whatnot. Flames are being fanned by somebody out there. So competitors, other PR agencies, etc.
Yeah. Well, I think what I'll go on record and say is that, we have a really short attention span and kind of a memory span. Cracker Barrel will be all right. You know what I mean? And I have always been a big fan of Cracker Barrel for breakfast and stuff like that. And when everything kind of went down, because they always have these crazy wait times to get in there, I was like, we should go to Cracker Barrel for breakfast. Now's the time to do it. So they're gonna be just fine. I think to round us out, I just want to ask you a couple rapid fire questions, and I think we can have some fun here. I have my thoughts on this, but what is your favorite Lee's menu item?
I mean, just our famous recipe chicken strips. Can't go wrong. I'm more of a boneless guy than a bone-in guy, but so I'll go with the strips all day long.
Strips for me too, man. Literally same thing. And the biscuits. Those biscuits are, they are addicting.
Yeah, I can keep going. Our mashed potatoes and gravy are hard to beat. Our green beans are fantastic. I mean, there's a lot of ancillary items, but you go there for the chicken. So,
Is there a favorite LTO?
we did a Nashville hot flavor about a year ago, a little over a year ago, that I really liked because I'm a spicy guy. That was really good, but so maybe that'll come back again.
And for the viewers too, if you're not familiar, LTO means limited time offer. So just something that's kind of in and out in the product offering. I think I really want to ask you this too, because I have a campaign off the top of my head, but what's a really interesting or underrated marketing campaign from any brand that you wish you had made, that you think back on and you were really inspired by it?
Oh wow. I mean, you're too young to even remember, but Wendy's Where's the Beef? I mean, that was such a memorable, funny campaign. I mean, I gravitate towards humor. We're starting to dabble more and more into humor with what we do. We're working with a couple of up and coming comedians to put together some social media content and stunts, and so I'm all about, like, how can you make your advertising and branding funny? And that was the earliest one I can remember from when I was a little kid.
One advertising campaign that comes to mind for me that I really loved because I thought it was powerful was Doritos. Doritos had a marketing campaign where they were running these ads where they were showing the red and the blue bag with no branding on it. It was just the red bag and the blue bag. And you knew exactly what it was. You knew it was Doritos. They had this whole advertisement, and they didn't even put Doritos on the ad. You just knew that from the red and the blue bag what it was. And I thought that demonstrated really well the power of brand equity and something as simple as packaging from just a color and the association you have with it to something else. So I was really glad for that.
Another one that you're too young to remember, but you might have heard of, was the Pepsi Challenge, and the notion of just like a blind taste test. And I still I keep this one in my back pocket because I'd like to try it sometime. Because I will stack our chicken up against anybody's. We're just a smaller brand, smaller budgets, less awareness. We're regional. People don't know us everywhere, but you put our food in your mouth. That's the key thing. So that's one that I remember, and I may actually replicate someday.
What brand inside or outside of the food world do you admire right now, and why?
Raising Cane's is a brand that I have a lot of admiration for, and not just because my good friend Kim is their CMO, but they've figured out a way to sell, in my opinion, pretty average product, but get people to just love it. They have great operations. They build great looking restaurants, but they have found a way to get that younger audience, even younger than you, to love their product. And so yeah, that's one I would point to.
You're obviously a huge rock and roll fan. Obviously, I am too. I want to ask you about a couple bands. I want to just kind of have you pick one or the other, this or that. Right off the top, this is a tough one. Megadeth or Metallica?
Not tough at all. That's easy. Metallica all the way. Come on.
Hey, good answer, man. I agree with you. Some people would debate it, but I think Metallica, man, you can't go wrong with those guys. All right, Black Sabbath, Dio or Ozzy?
Again, I don't even see a question there. Ozzy, all the way.
Good man, good man. I got some family members that are on the Dio camp, so I have to debate that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can look at Black Sabbath and all that, they've done for heavy metal and rock and roll and not think of Ozzy Osbourne, right? Okay, but this is one I think you have a little bit
Yeah,
of a
you already know.
minority.
Yeah.
You have a minority opinion here. All right, Van Halen with Sammy Hagar or David Lee Roth?
Well, I will start by saying I love both versions, and I consider them two totally separate, different bands. But I mean, I grew up with the Sammy Hagar era. That's those were my junior high school years, and as I was just getting into music. So I went back to listen to Dave era. I didn't have an older brother or sister that was forming my musical opinions. I was taking it as it came, and so plus I live in St. Louis, and Sammy Hagar owns this town. I mean, he's royalty in St. Louis. He'll play theaters in other cities. He comes to St. Louis and sells out 20,000 seats at the amphitheater here. So we all love Sammy Hagar in St. Louis.
This one was the hardest one for me to answer, and I don't know that I have a definitive answer, but if you had to pick, would you rather roll with Foo Fighters or Nirvana?
Foo Fighters, 1,000%. They're my favorite band out there right now. You already know that.
Yeah.
They're the only band, in my opinion, still making great rock and roll right now. And so I got love-hate stuff with Nirvana. Again, my era, my small little window of time in high school of all the Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, etc. Nirvana killed them, right? I mean, they're like the one song, "Smells Like Teen Spirit," killed my whole era of music, and so that's the hate part. But also, they were pretty damn good. I saw them back in the day. I did get to see them once. But I just the body of work. I'll take the Foo Fighters any day of the week.
If there was one artist, active, inactive, maybe even no longer here anymore, who would you want to see live?
I'd want to see Eddie Van Halen again live because he's the best ever. But I was lucky enough to see him a bunch. So maybe somebody that I've never seen. I mean, the Beatles back in the day would have been pretty epic. That would have been pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm jealous. I've never had the luxury of seeing Eddie Van Halen. I would have loved to do that or go to a prime time, like early to mid 80s Ozzy show, or, like the number one that comes to mind is Jimi Hendrix. To be dropped into an early 70s, who knows what kind of venue you're at, and Jimi Hendrix pulls up. Man, how cool would that have been to have that experience? I'll go ahead and wrap us up here. Is there anything that you want to shamelessly plug before we hop off here?
Just if anybody's listening and they're anywhere near a Lee's famous recipe that they haven't visited in a long time, come back and see us. We're making big changes. We're going to remodel all the restaurants. That's already started. There's been a handful that have been completed, and next year we're going to go full speed ahead with getting these renovations and remodels done. And it won't be the same Lee's that you remember. The food will, but it'll be in a much better setting.
Right on. Well, beautifully said. And first off, Dan, I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for hopping on here and being a guest with us on Brands and Banter. Also want to thank everybody who is going to watch this. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sticking with us through this conversation. And subscribe to The Gist if you want access to more conversations like this with cool people. As cool as Dan? Well, hopefully as cool as Dan, right? But thank you for your time. Thank you for tuning in. Thank Dan for his time. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next edition of Brands and Banter.